going. There's a lot to get through. It is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and this is the Minnesota Senate Committee on Education Finance. Welcome, everybody, and we will now come to order. Today, our Senate Council Research and Fiscal Analysis will walk through our Senate Omnibus bill and spreadsheet, and then we will hear testimony on the bill. So I'm going to begin by turning it over to Jenna Hofer, who will walk through the aid and levy spreadsheets. And members, I would ask that you hold your questions until the end of the spreadsheet. Ms. Hofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. In your packets today, you have 3 spreadsheets that describe the effects of the A3 amendment to Senate File 2255. I'll briefly give you an overview of each of the 3 spreadsheets, and then we'll walk through the aid and the levy spreadsheets. So the first spreadsheet you have in the upper left-hand corner under 2025 Legislature Education Finance Committee is titled Net General Fund Changes by Proposal from the February 2025 Forecast. It's a single-page document, front and back, that's legal sized. I won't be walking through this spreadsheet itself, as this shows the net effect of each proposal. So this would combine the effects of individual line items on the detailed spreadsheet to show you the total effect of a proposal on the budget, and this just isolates the change items. The next spreadsheet in your packets in the upper left-hand corner is titled General Fund Aid Appropriations Summary. This is also a legal-sized document, and it's about 4 pages front and back. And then the final spreadsheet is the property tax tracking spreadsheet, and this is a legal-sized document that's about 2 pages front and back. I'll walk through these 2 spreadsheets, and we'll start with the General Fund Aid Appropriations Summary. For this spreadsheet, there's line numbers going down the left-hand side. The next column lists the appropriation. Columns A, B, and C show the February forecast base for each biennium. Columns D through O show the effect of the A3 amendment, including columns E, I, and N that show the change from the February forecast for each biennium. I'll begin on line 3 of the spreadsheet, which shows the basic formula allowance. This is also shown on on line 8. The A3 amendment would reduce the basic formula allowance in fiscal years 28 and 29 and delink it from inflation. The A3 amendment would continue the formula allowance as proposed in the February forecast for fiscal years 26 and 27. So on line 3, for fiscal year 2026, the basic formula allowance would be $7,481, which was the amount determined by the Commissioner of Education in February of this year. In column G, for fiscal year 2027, the formula allowance would be $7,705 per pupil, which is the amount projected under the February forecast. And then in columns K and L for fiscal years 28 and 29, the formula allowance would be $7,705 per pupil in each year. On line 8, the total for this proposal for the general education portion is a reduction in general fund spending in fiscal year 2028 of $219,588,000, and in fiscal year 2029, it's a reduction of $391,737. I'll note that the basic formula allowance is a factor in a couple of other formulas on the spreadsheet. So when the basic formula allowance increases, a handful of other categorical programs also increase. So I will note those lines as we go through the spreadsheet, and you can see the effect on those programs as well. On line 9, the A3 proposes a modification to the compensatory revenue formula. It would provide a hold harmless in fiscal years 2026 and 2027. This would be an increase in general fund spending for the 26-27 biennium of $46,073,000. And in the 28-29 biennium, it would be an increase of $3,292,000. On line 10, The A3 proposes to increase English learner cross-subsidy reduction aid beginning in fiscal year 2028. So this would cover about a third of districts' unreimbursed costs for English learners beginning in fiscal year 2028. This is an increase of $26,679,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 11 is an interaction for the non-public pupil transportation aid program. This repeal of the non-public pupil transportation aid program results in a reduction to transportation sparsity revenue for districts because there will be less expenditures billed to the program. So this would be a reduction of $543,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $1,324,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Down on line 23, this is a line 19, consolidation transition aid. This was from a Senator Rarick bill. This would increase the amount of consolidation transition aid to districts beginning in fiscal year 2026. This is an increase of $487,000 in the first biennium and $504,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 23 is a modified proposal from the governor's budget. The governor's budget eliminated non-public pupil education aid beginning in fiscal year 2026, including the final 10% payment owed to districts for fiscal year 2025. The A3 amendment would maintain that 10% payment in fiscal year 2026. That is a result of the 2025 entitlement. So this in total would reduce general fund spending by $50,154,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $57,665,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 24 is another proposal from the governor's budget that was modified slightly. This is the elimination of non-public pupil transportation aid. Again, the proposal would maintain the fiscal year 2025 10% cleanup payment that is paid in 2026. And the reduction to the general fund spending in the 26-27 biennium would be $54,873,000. And in the 28-29 biennium, it's a reduction of $61,346,000. On line 27 is additional school unemployment aid. This is additional aid of $100 million in the fiscal year 26-27 biennium only, and this money would be transferred to the Special Revenue Fund. This line interacts with another line down the spreadsheet for special education aid, and I will describe that effect in more detail when we get to that line. Lines 32 and 33 are also from the governor's budget. This is a proposal to increase the Department of Education's administrative allocation from 0.3% of district's second prior year revenue to 1.3%. This would be an increase in the administrative allocation of $1,679,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $1,635,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Turning to page 2. On line 42 is a modification to Compass and MTSS. It reduces the total appropriation by $500,000 per year or $1 million per biennium. On line 46, you can see that the bill would eliminate the allocation for CARES implementation, support, and evaluation, though the A3 does make this an allowable use of MDE's implementation support funding. On line 47, the amendment proposes to eliminate the computer science education appropriation. This is a reduction of $500,000 per biennium. $1 million per biennium. On line 53 is a proposal related to full-service community schools. The appropriation amount for fiscal years 26 and later does not change from the forecasted amount. However, the A3 amendment would extend the availability of the fiscal year 2026 appropriation through fiscal year 2029, and the fiscal year 2027 appropriation would be available through fiscal year 2030. Additionally, the A3 amendment proposes to extend the fiscal year 2025 appropriation for full-service community schools through fiscal year 2027. And in the absence of this extension, it's estimated that $139,000 would otherwise cancel to the general fund. On line 58 is an extension for the Innovative Service Learning Grants for the fiscal year 2024 appropriation. This would make the appropriation available through fiscal year 2026. In the absence of this extension, it's estimated that $310,000 would cancel to the general fund. Down to line 70, the A3 amendment proposes to eliminate the base funding for the Minnesota Independence College and Community. So the fiscal year 26 and 27 appropriations would remain at the base level of $625,000 per year. And then in fiscal year 2028 and 2029, it would be reduced to zero, which is a savings of $1,250,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 71 is an increase to the Minnesota Math Corps program of $1 million in fiscal year 2026 only. Line 73 is a modification to the museums and education centers. While the total appropriation for this program does not change, the allocation among the museums is modified in the A3 amendment. Line 79, the A3 amendment proposes to eliminate funding for the Santa Foundation. This results in a reduction to general fund spending of $3 million in each biennium. Line 81, the A3 proposes to eliminate Starbase Minnesota funding. This is a savings to the general fund of $1 million in each biennium. Line 84 is a modification to the student organizations appropriation. The total appropriation for each year does not change. However, the appropriation in each year would be limited to elementary and secondary student organizations. Funding would no longer be provided to higher education student organizations. That takes us to page 3. Down on line 105. This is a proposal from the governor's budget that would move the Collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educators of Color grants from the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board to MDE. There was no change in the total appropriation from the February forecast. We're just moving where the money is allocated to. So the A3 would allocate the $10,880,000 per biennium to MDE. And if you look down to line 121, you can see an equal reduction in each biennium to the appropriation listed under Pelsby. On line 106, the A3 amendment proposes to eliminate the funding for the Come Teach in Minnesota Hiring Bonuses Program. This is a reduction in general fund spending of $800,000 per biennium. This money is typically transferred to the Special Revenue Fund, where it sits in an account and is used to provide hiring bonuses to teachers. And because these hiring bonuses are paid out over the course of 4 years, the Special Revenue Fund account would be closed at the end of fiscal year 2029 to allow for those who are currently in the process or making progress towards attaining a bonus would allow them to retain that. On line 109 is the appropriation for Grow Your Own. The A3 amendment proposes reducing funding for Grow Your Own by $13,908,000 per biennium. Line 110 would be a proposal from the governor's budget to move the mentoring and retention incentive grants from the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board to the Department of Education. Additionally, the A3 amendment proposes reducing funding for this grant by $1 million per year. So in total, it would be an increase to MDE of $7 million per biennium. But then down on line 124, you can see that the reduction is $9 million per biennium. So on net, this is a reduction of $2 million per biennium for this program. Line 112, the A3 would provide an appropriation for special education apprenticeship programs. This is $6 million in the fiscal year 26-27 biennium only. Line 115, the A3 modifies the distribution of the student support personnel aid by increasing the revenue minimum and adjusting the allowances. In total, this is a reduction of $7,000 in the fiscal year 26-27 biennium and an increase of $92,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 120, the A3 increases the appropriation for the alternative pathways support position by $113,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $116,000 in the 28-29 biennium. I already spoke to line 121, which moves the Collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educators of Color grants to MDE. You can see the reduction here of $10,880,000, which moves up to the Department of Education. Line 122, the A3 proposes increasing the funding for the heritage, language, and culture teachers by $225,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $228,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 123, the A3 proposes increasing the licensure via portfolio online platform appropriation by $492,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $342,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 124 is the line that I previously mentioned that moves the mentoring and retention incentive grants from PELSB to MDE, reducing PELSB's appropriations by $9 million per biennium. Line 125 is a proposal to eliminate funding for the pathway preparation grants. This is a savings to the general fund of $800,000 per biennium. That takes us to the top of page 4. On line 129 is a proposal to eliminate funding for the teacher recruitment marketing campaign. This is a reduction to general fund spending of $1 million per biennium. On line 135, the A3 provides mascot replacement assistance in the amount of $3,972,000 in fiscal year 2026 only. On line 138, the A3 provides permanent school fund supplemental aid to tribal contract schools in the amount of $40,000 per year or $80,000 per biennium. On line 139 is a modification to the tribal contract schools aid. This is related to the reduction in the basic formula allowance earlier in the spreadsheet. As a result, this would reduce the tribal contract school appropriation by $348,000 in the 28 and 29 biennium. Lines 146 through 148 are related to special education aid. On line 147, the A3 proposes to increase the cross-subsidy reduction aid by increasing the factor to 53.26% beginning in fiscal year 2028. This would increase special education aid by $96,718,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 148 is the interaction with school unemployment aid. Under the February forecast, it is assumed that once the school unemployment aid runs out, districts would then begin billing special education expenses for the special education paras to special education aid. This would result in an increase in special education aid for those years. So as a result of providing additional school unemployment aid in fiscal years 26 and 27, it reduces the amount of expenditures that would be billed to special education aid. This results in a reduction in special education aid in the 26-27 biennium of $22,768,000 and a reduction in the 28-29 biennium of $47,392,000. Line 153, the A3 provides an appropriation for cardiac emergency response plan assistance. This is $2,250,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $500,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 156, the A3 proposes eliminating funding for the gender-neutral single-user restroom grants. This is a reduction in general fund spending of $2 million per biennium. On line 157 through 159 are modifications to long-term facilities maintenance aid. On line 158, the A3 proposes eliminating long-term facilities maintenance aid for charter schools. This would reduce long-term facilities maintenance aid by $19,994,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $22,194,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 159 would allow districts to generate additional long-term facilities maintenance aid for costs related to roof repair and replacement. This would increase LTFM by $2,970,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $9,930,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 165, the A3 would provide an appropriation for summer electronic benefit transfer support to districts in the amount of $150,000 per year or $300,000 per biennium. Line 166, the bill would eliminate the summer school food service replacement aid in the amount of $300,000 per biennium. Over to page 5. On line 169, the basic system support aid is modified as a result of reducing the basic formula allowance in fiscal years 28 and 29. This would reduce the basic library system support aid by $1,269,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 170 would be an increase to the electronic library for Minnesota appropriation. It's an increase of $2 million per biennium. Line 174 and 175 is a modification to school library aid. Under current law, beginning in fiscal year 2026, the department may retain $130,000 per year from the school library aid appropriation to fund the state school librarian. The A3 amendment proposes eliminating the set aside for the state school librarian from the school library aid and instead provides a direct appropriation to the department further down the spreadsheet. On line 189 is a reduction in the early childhood teacher shortage program. It eliminates the program. This is a reduction to general fund spending of $1 million per biennium. On line 199, the A3 proposes providing funding to the Metro Deaf School in the amount of $150,000 in each fiscal year 26 and 27. That takes us to page 6. On page 6, line 212 is a modification to the amount of early childhood family education aid that's appropriated to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and transferred to the Department of Education. This is a result of reducing the basic formula allowance in fiscal years 28 and later. This would reduce the forecasted ECFE aid by $3,356,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Down to line 235, the A3 provides an operating adjustment to the Department of Education in the amount of $2,042,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $2,730,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 240, the A3 would eliminate the adult use cannabis education funding to the Department of Education. This is a reduction in general fund spending of $240,000 per biennium. Line 242 would increase the appropriation to the Board of School Administrators by $478,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $378,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Line 247 would provide the department with funding for fraud detection and prevention in the amount of $1,100,000 in each biennium. Line 250 provides $6 million in fiscal year 2026 only to the Department of Education for legal costs. On page 7, line 253, the A3 amendment would cancel part of the fiscal year 2025 appropriation to the Office of the Inspector General, which is expected to go unspent. This is $1.5 million in fiscal year 2025. On line 256, the A3 would cancel $500,000 in fiscal year 2025 from the specific learning disability criteria change allocation for rulemaking that is expected to go unspent. On line 257 is related to an earlier line. This provides the department funding for the state school librarian in the amount of $260,000 per biennium. On line 263 is an operating adjustment for the Minnesota State Academies in the amount of $1,010,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $1,352,000 in the 28-29 biennium. On line 270 is an operating adjustment for the Purpose Center for Arts Education in the amount of $535,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $716,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Lines 271 through 273 modifies the 2025 appropriation to Purpose for classroom and dormitory furniture. The A3 would extend the availability of that funding through fiscal year 2027, and it would also allow the funding to be used for IT costs. In the absence of this extension, it's expected that $380,000 would cancel to the general fund in fiscal year 2025. On line 278 is an operating adjustment for Pelsby in the amount of $700,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $800,000 in the 28-29 biennium. Down on line 287 is the amount that would carry forward or otherwise go unspent in the 24-25 biennium. This is $2 million that would be carried forward for spending in fiscal year 2026. As a result, on line 289, you see the net total general fund balance for E12 education. In the 24-25 biennium, it would be $24,546,658,000, which is a reduction of $2 million from the February forecast. In the 26-27 biennium, the amount is $25,721,409,000, which is no change from the February forecast. And in the 28-29 biennium, spending would be $26,771,228,000, which is a reduction of $687,400,000. And finally, on page 8, lines 298 through 309 show the changes to the special revenue fund as a result of other changes in the proposal. As I mentioned, the Come Teach in Minnesota hiring bonuses, Grow Your Own, and school unemployment aid appropriations are all transferred to the special revenue fund account. You can see that the revenue on lines 304 to 307 is modified for each of these proposals. On line 305, there is a reduction in revenue to the special revenue fund account of $800,000 per biennium for the Come Teach in Minnesota hiring bonuses. On line 306, there's a reduction of $13,908,000 for Grow Your Own, and there's an increase on line 307 for the school unemployment aid of $1 million. On net, for line 309, the total special revenue fund change items equal 0 in each biennium. Madam Chair, that gets us through the aid tracking spreadsheet, and we will now turn to the property tax tracking spreadsheet. There is one change item on the spreadsheet. On line 25 of the spreadsheet is the ice arena levy. The A3 amendment would allow cooperative levy authority for ice arenas. So districts would be able to apportion levy costs for ice arenas and share that among the cooperating districts. You'll recall that the fiscal note for this shared that it was possible that there would be an increase in levies as a result of this proposal. However, the amount is unknown at this time. So if you turn all the way to the back page, page 4 on line 130, you can see that in each year there is 0 net change to state levies under the A3 amendment. Madam Chair, that gets us through the spreadsheet, and I believe we can now turn to the walkthrough.
Thank you, Ms. Hofer, and thank you for your good hard work on this. Members, any questions or comments? All right, we are going to move right along. Scarfa is now going to walk us through the Omnibus bill. This is informational only, and we have at least 1 hour easily worth of testimony after this. So members' comments on the bills should be held until the end of the hearing, or we can save it for tomorrow's markup to accommodate our testifiers. Let's see here. I'm going to just turn it right over to Scarfa, and you may begin.
Madam Chair, members, we'll walk through each section of the bill as quickly as we can here. Members, if you have the summary also in front of you, each section is summarized, not including the appropriations section. And at the end of the summary text for each section, in square brackets, there's references to Senate files and authors that authored this session, the underlying provision that is included in the A3 Delete Everything Amendment. Article 1 is the general education article. Section 1 is the provision from Senate File 82, Senator Eric, increasing consolidation transition aid for consolidating districts. The section also strikes some obsolete language. Section 2 comes from two bills, Senate File 2713, Senator Clark, and Senate File 3163, Senator Farnsworth. The sections 2 and 3 both come from that bill and clarify that in cases of consolidated districts, the referendum levy authority created as a result of the consolidation may also be renewed by the consolidated school board in the same fashion as unconsolidated districts. Section 4 on page 3 begins a series of sections all related to the governor's proposal on non-public pupil transportation and non-public pupil aids. Sections 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all relate to the repeal of a district's obligation to transport non-public pupils within the boundaries of the district and the repeal of the aid program for that activity. On page 8, section 9 relates to English learner cross-subsidy aids. There were a couple bills proposing increases to this program, including Senate File 1125, Senator Clark, Senate File 1612, Senator Umer Verbatim. And this proposal is kind of a modification of that idea. And as Ms. Hofer indicated, increases the cross-subsidy aid percentage beginning in fiscal year 2028. Section 10 is from a Senator McEwen bill, Senate File 2188, and delays the expiration of the school unemployment aid program until June 30, 2028, consistent with other elements of the proposal in front of you. Section 11 is a section governing compensation revenue pupil units for the purposes of compensatory aid. This section was proposed by the governor and included in Senate File 2002 from Senator Clark. The language on the top of page 10 is a modification of those two proposals and would provide a sort of hold harmless for the calculation of aids in fiscal year 2026 only. Under that language, the district's compensatory pupil units for aid in that year would be the greater of the compensation pupil units computed in the normal fashion for fiscal year 2026, or the building's actual compensation revenue pupil units computed for fiscal year 2024, with an adjustment for buildings that over those 2 years experienced a decline in enrollment in the building. Section 12 modifies the basic revenue formula allowance, as Ms. Hofer described earlier. And just to say again, the formula allowance indicated for fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027 in the new language beginning at 10.16 are the amounts under the February forecast. Section 13 on page 11 it comes from governor recommendation, Senate File 2002, Senator Clark, and with some modifications. The language in the middle of page 11 delays the transition from the old or previous law compensatory aid formula to the new compensatory aid formula for 1 more year. So it'd be, in fiscal 26 only, the revenues would be calculated under the previous law, and beginning in fiscal 27, the revenues would be calculated under the under the new formula. The language on the top of page 12 is new language to the committee and provides that for fiscal 2027 only, a district's total compensatory revenue must equal at least the amount of revenue for that school district in fiscal year 2026, with an adjustment for any enrollment or average daily membership decline for the district between fiscal 24 and 25. So it is a kind of a second alternative way to provide some hold harmless revenue for a school district only in fiscal year 2027. Page 12, section 14, is another section from the governor and the Senate File 2002, the Clark bill, just conforming language to delay the transition to the new compensatory aid formula. Section 15 is the third section related to the referendum renewal authority that I described earlier from the Clark and Farnsworth bills, and clarifies that an expiring referendum may be renewed by the school board, including any referendum authority that was created as a result of a school district consolidation. And the new language in the middle of page 13 in paragraphs B and D clarify the kind of time window within which a resolution for renewal must be adopted. Page 13, section 16 is one section from a Senator Dornick bill, Senate File 3188. The new language is on the top of page 15. You can see at page 15, line 7, some stricken language. The effect of this is that an area learning center operated by a service cooperative, intermediate district, education district, or joint powers cooperative may charge tuition. And if it elects to charge tuition, the district of residence must pay that tuition in an amount equal to 100% of the district average general education revenue with some subtractions as under current law. Page 15, section 17 is an unemployment insurance report. This is from a Senator McEwen bill, Senate File 2188, and it requires the report to separately identify special ed paras separately from other paraprofessionals. Section 18 is again from the governor and Senate File 2002, Senator Clark, and delays the repeal of various compensatory aid statutory sections until the new formula comes into effect beginning in fiscal year 2027. Page 16, section 19 proposes a compensatory revenue task force. A task force was proposed in Senate File 2002, Senator Clark, as introduced, and in Senate File 1357, Senator Kunesh. This is a sort of modification of those two proposals and establishes the task force and its duties, provides for its membership, administrative support, and expiration, and it requires a report to the legislature from the task force. Section 20 is the appropriations section that Ms. Hofer described earlier. Page 21, section 21, the revisor instruction is from the governor's recommendation and directs the revisor to substitute district, charter school, or tribal school at various places in statutory chapters and in grant programs established under Laws 2023 or Laws 2024 to ensure that tribal contract schools are eligible grantees for any grant program for which a school district and a charter school is currently eligible. And finally, Madam Chair, on page 22, section 22 is the repealer, and this section repeals various statutory provisions related to non-public transportation requirements and non-public pupil aid requirements. And Madam Chair, that repealer is from the governor's recommendation and concludes Article 1, General Education.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments on Article 1? All right, we'll keep going. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, I will do Article 2, which is Education Excellence. It begins on page 22, Section 1, is from the governor's bill, and the changes are striking language on page 24, lines 20 to 27, and that is related to the computer science working group and striking requirements upon the commissioner. Then section 2 is from Senate File 1323, Senator Gustafson's bill related to the Math Corps program and requiring the program to use evidence-based instructional support to evaluate and accelerate student learning on foundational math skills. Section 3 is from the governor's recommendation, and it's relates to the achievement and integration program and the timing for the progress report. Then section 4 is on page 26, another provision from the governor's rec, and it strikes obsolete language. Section 5 increases the admin and allows the department to retain some of the initial achievement and integration revenue. And that's also from the governor's rec. Section 6 is again from the governor's recommendation, and it's related to the department's review and direct of achievement integration plans, and directing the districts on how to spend part of their revenue. Section 7 is from Senate File 3186, the May Quaid bill regarding literacy aid. It's changing from literacy incentive aid to literacy aid, and it changes the calculation for fiscal years 2027 and later. Section 8 is from the governor's recommendation regarding full-service community schools, and it's extending the availability of the appropriation, the 2024 and 2025 appropriations to 2027. Section 9 is for the chair's recommendation and related to the innovation service learning grants and extending the availability of that appropriation until 2026. Section 10 is what Ms. Hofer went through on the spreadsheets of the appropriations, and then there's a repealer on page 41, which is section 11, and that repeals some provisions related to computer science. And that, Madam Chair, is the end of Article 2.
Questions or comments on Article 2? All right, continue, please.
Madam Chair, members, and Article 3 is the teacher's article, starting on page 41. Section 1 is from Senate File 1462 for Senator Kunesh, as well as in the governor's recommendation, and that is transferring the reporting requirements for the teachers of color and American Indian teachers reporting from the Pellsby to the department. Section 2 is the chair's recommendation regarding the Come Teach in Minnesota bonuses, expiring that program. Section 3 is from the Senate File 1462 and the governor's recommendation regarding the QGMEC grants and transferring that authority from Pellsby to the department, as well as modifying grant awards and criteria for awarding grant and the uses of the grants. And that's a long section. That gets us to page 46. That is section 4 is from Senate File 1462, as well as the governor's rec, and that is the transferring the teacher mentorship grants from Pellsby to the department, and it also expands some grant eligibility or recipients for the grants. Page 47, section 5 is from Senate File 1462, and that's removing the priority from Pellsby to commissioner, as well as removing the requirement for the grants to be limited to Tier 2 or Tier 3 teachers. Section 6, towards the bottom of page 47, is another provision from Senate File 1462 and the governor's recommendation removing the teacher mentorship grants from Pellsby to MDE. Section 7 is another of that same bill and same program transfer. Section 8 is, again, that same thing, the transferring, and it changes the report frequency for those grants, the teacher mentorship grants. Section 9 is same thing with the teacher mentorship program and transferring the positions. Section 10 is the beginning of some sections related to the student support personnel aid program. And it adds to the definitions people or individuals working towards reducing chronic absenteeism. You see that language at the top of page 49, and provides a definition of eligible cooperative unit. Section 11 is from Senate File 133 is Senator Weber, and Senate File 474 from Senator Kunesh, and it expands the purpose of the student support personnel aid to include attendance. Section 12 is a Senator Kunesh recommendation, and it is for student support personnel aid and modifies the calculation. Section 13 on page 50 is chairman's rec as well as governor's recommendation to have a calculation for, or changing the calculation for eligible cooperative units and receiving student support personnel aid. And then section 14 comes from Senate File 133 and Senate File 474, and modifies the allowed uses to include transportation, technology, and training for student support personnel. Then section 15 on page 52 comes from Senate File 844 for Senator Houschild as well as Senator Kunesh recommendation, and it allows for student support services personnel aid for districts with declining enrollment. Section 16 is from Senate File 1462, and it's the alternative teacher preparation program report, and it only is required in years where funding is received. Section 17 is from Senate Files 1462 and relates to the transfer for the QMEC grants and the teacher mentorship grants, and it's transferring the contracts, obligations, and unexpended funds, as well as staff from Pellsby to MDE. And then section 18 is the beginning of the appropriations. These appropriations to MDE as well as to Pellsby. And then section 20 of this article is on page 60, and comes to chairperson's recommendation, and it's just codifying the agricultural educators grant and statutes instead of session law. And that's the end of Article 3.
Questions or comments, members? All right, we'll keep going.
Madam Chair, Article 4 begins on page 60. It's the American Indian Education article. Section 1 is a governor's recommendation. Clarifies that the Minnesota Indian Teacher Training Program scholarships are available to students progressing through educational goals, including students in an early education through grade 12 setting. Section 2 is from a Senate File 2285, Senator Lucero. Relates to the carry forward authority for unspent American Indian education aid. The stricken in new language is at 61.28, and removes the requirement that a school district's American Indian Parent Advisory Committee concur with the district's educational offerings in order for unspent amounts to carry forward into the following fiscal year. Section 3 on page 62 is a governor's recommendation, striking language to conform with other proposals to repeal the non-public pupil transportation aid and non-public pupil aid programs. Section 4 on page 63 is the appropriations section. That gets us all the way through the end of this article, and that concludes Article 4, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that section? All right, let's keep going.
Page 65, Article 5 is the special education article. There's one section except for the appropriations, and so Section 1 increases the special education cross-subsidy reduction aid percentage beginning in fiscal year 2028. There were a handful of bills proposing something similar to this in the legislature this year, including bills from Senator Coleman, Senator Umar Verbaeten, Senator Clark, and this is a sort of modification of those underlying ideas. Section 2 is the appropriations section, and that concludes the special ed article.
All right, unless there's questions, we'll move on to Article 6. Let's go.
Article 6 begins on page 67. It's the facilities health and safety article. Section 1 relates to cardiac emergency response plan requirements. This comes from a Senator Westland bill, Senate File 1457. Section 2 on page 68 begins a handful of sections all relating to the long-term facilities maintenance program. These sections were originally proposed in Senate File 1198 from Senator Hauschild and would allow the costs of roof repair and replacement to be included in the allowable revenue for districts that currently are at the LTFM revenue cap. That would be sections 2, 3, 4, and 5. On page 70, section 6 comes from a Senator Mayquade bill, Senate File 1460. The new language is both in the middle of page 71 and the bulk of the new language in paragraphs F and G on page 72. The effect of the language altogether is that a district can renew by board action an expiring capital project levy referendum that was initially approved by the district's voters. The board can renew at one time. It must be at the same amount as the amount expiring, no longer than for a term no longer than the initial term approved by the voters, among other requirements. Page 73, section 7 begins a series of 3 sections that all were originally proposed in the governor's recommendation, and Senate staff worked with MDE school finance staff to modify these sections to accomplish the governor's intent. Section 7 strikes the current law exemption from review and comment for projects funded entirely with lease levy proceeds. Section 8 is kind of the complement to that earlier section, and the new language beginning at 73.27 provides that projects funded with building lease levy in excess of those project value thresholds are subject to commissioner's review and comment. Paragraph B, I think, codifies and clarifies the current practice for commissioner's review of approval of building lease levy applications to include the various measures of the school district need and financial health. Other changes are just conforming to those those are basic ideas. Section 9 on page 75 provides definitions applicable to the building lease levy statutory section, again, to provide greater clarity in statutory definitions that basically implement what is currently happening in practice with the commissioner's application review process. Section 10 is the ice arena levy authority from the Senator Rarick bill, Senate File 1679, and authorizes 2 more school districts to enter into a cooperative agreement to operate an ice arena and apportion any necessary levy costs among themselves. Section 11 is, again, from the Senator Westland Cardiac Emergency Response Plan bill, and requires the Minnesota State High School League to adopt a cardiac emergency response plan. The section also requires that the league must ensure that a SERP response team is present at each interscholastic athletic activity under the league's authority. Section 12 is the appropriations section. Section 13, the repealer on page 78 repeals the long-term facilities maintenance aid for charter schools. And Madam Chair, that concludes Article 6.
Questions or comments? All right, let's move on to Article 7.
Article 7, Madam Chair, is the school nutrition and libraries article. The first section is a governor's recommendation clarifying requirements for nonprofit organizations applying for sponsorship as a multi-site sponsoring organization under the Federal Child and Adult Care Food Program and Federal Summer Food Program. Section 2 on page 80 is a combination of governor's recommendation and provisions from Senate File 2965, Senator Kunesh. The general purpose is to expand the range of eligible uses of funds in the school food service fund, clarifying current practice, clarifying when administrative costs attributable to staff may be charged to the food service fund. The new language on the top of page 82 in new paragraph J provides that costs indicated here may be charged to the food service fund if the district's food service fund is running in excess for or a surplus for 3 successive fiscal years. Section 3, page 82 is a governor's recommendation repurposing money for summer EBT program administrative activities. Section 4 is a technical clarification clarifying that only independent and special school districts are eligible for school library aid, not including so-called common districts or non-operating districts. Section 5 reduces the eligible uses of school library aid. This is from a Senate File 2486, Senator Kunesh bill. Section 6 is the appropriations section. Finally, on page 84, Section 7, the repealer repeals one subdivision from the school library aid statutory section. This is the subdivision that, under current law, authorizes the department to retain up to $130,000 of school library aid to fund the costs of the state school librarian. This section, this authority is repealed, and instead, the costs of the state school librarian are funded with a direct appropriation in a later article of this proposal. Madam Chair, that concludes Article 7.
All right, any questions, comments? All right, let's move to Article 8.
Madam Chair and members, Article 8, the Early Childhood Education article, begins on page 85, line 1. Sections 1 through 9 all come from the Governor's Department of Children, Youth, and Families budget bill, so I won't list that after each and every section. Section 1 and 2 both modify the appropriation transfer authority for MDE by removing obsolete references to early childhood family education and school readiness plus programs, which were recodified to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families statutes. Section 3 on the top of page 86, line 1, modifies the aid payment schedule by stating that the school readiness program, health and developmental screening, and early childhood family education aid programs must still be paid on the K-12 aid payment schedule. Page 86, line 12 is section 4. This relates to the school readiness program and clarifies that funding is still subject to section 127A41, which relates to the distribution of the aid, and the aid payment schedule under section 127A45. The same language appears on lines 86.20 through 21, which is in section 5, and this relates to the voluntary pre-kindergarten program. Section 6 clarifies the developmental screening aid program. The change is over on page 87, line 9, and it also clarifies that this aid must be paid on the K-12 aid payment schedule. Section 7 on page 87, line 10, relates to the early childhood family education program. It clarifies that the formula allowance in this section is the formula allowance under section 126C10 subdivision 2. Page 87, line 17 is section 8. This relates to the early childhood family education program and clarifies that data must be reported to the Department of Education. Page 87, line 28 is section 9, which also relates to the early childhood family education program. This clarifies that the ECFE funding is subject to the K-12 aid payment schedule. Page 88, line 1 is section 10, which is the appropriations for the Department of Education. Page 88, line 15 is section 11, which is the appropriations for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And Madam Chair, that gets us through Article 8.
Perfect. Questions, comments? All right, let's move to Article 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Article 9 is a short one. Section 1 is appropriations that we went through on the spreadsheet.
Let's just move on to Article 10 then.
All right. Madam Chair and members, Article 10, state agencies, begins on page 92, line 3. Section 1, the change actually appears over on page 93, beginning at line 17. This cancels $1.5 million from the fiscal year 25 appropriation for the Office of Inspector General and $500,000 from the fiscal year 25 appropriation for engagement and rulemaking related to specific learning disability criteria. Section 2, beginning at page 93, line 21. The changes are mostly at the top of page 94. This would extend the availability of purposes appropriation for classroom and dormitory furniture through 2027, and it would also expand the uses of this appropriation to include equipment and technology. Page 94, line 7 is a chair's proposal. This would permit the Department of Education to only retain amounts that are appropriated to it for grant administration within this act, and states that section 16B98 subdivision 14 does not apply. Under 16B98 subdivision 14, agencies would be able to retain 5% of a grant appropriation for administrative costs when the grantee is legislatively named, and 10% for administrative costs when the grant is a competitive grant. Page 94, line 11 is the appropriations to the Department of Education that we already went through. Page 95, line 18 is the appropriations to the Minnesota State Academies that we went through on the spreadsheet. Page 95, line 27, section 6 is appropriations to the Purpose Center for Arts Education that we went through on the spreadsheet. Page 96, line 5 is section 7, appropriations to the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board that we went through on the spreadsheet. And that gets us through Article 10.
All right, let's move on to the next.
Madam Chair and members, finally, Article 11, the forecast article, begins on page 96, line 18. The forecast article adjusts the fiscal year 2025 forecasted appropriations so that they match what was included in the February 2025 forecast. This typically would account for changes in funding formulas like pupil counts or actual costs. There's no change from base. There's no net cost for any of the changes within this article.
Well, let's continue then.
Madam Chair, I apologize. That actually gets us all the way through to the end of the amendment.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Hofer, and Mr. Arneson for your review of this and all the work that you put into this A3 amendment. Members, any questions or comments at this point? All right, we are going to start. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm just going to make my comments now because we have a packed agenda. I just want to point out, Madam Chair, that I wanted to vote for this bill this year, and I thought because the budget was so bad that we were just going to be bare bones and that we were going to have a bipartisan bill. There's no way, unless we make significant changes tomorrow, that I can vote for this. I mean, we have $100 million for unemployment for seasonal employees, but we can't pay to give kids a ride to a school. Some student of color that maybe has a scholarship to a private school, we're not going to give them a ride to school. But we have money for $100 million in library aid. I don't remember any schools asking for library aid. They all had libraries. We have money for that. But we don't have money for charter schools to fix their buildings. I'm looking at the state agency, $47 million. And we have, I noticed some interesting things here. $2 million each year for the Inspector General. That's funny. When the largest fraud in the history of this state occurred in this agency. But we have $2 million for that. But we don't have money for charter schools. And we have $2 million for staffing the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in this bill that will probably cause us to lose federal funds as a result of that. But we don't have money for teacher pensions, which is what they're asking for. This is disappointing. I remember a couple weeks ago talking to Senator Swedzinski saying, I really want to vote for the policy bill and the finance bill. I hope the policy bill turns out better than this, because this is not what people are asking for. We can't even give kids a ride to school. Some kid on a scholarship, we can't even give them a ride to school. It's embarrassing, Madam Chair.
All right, we are now going to begin with our testimony, and I'd like to invite Commissioner Jett to the table.
She's an HHS.
Okay. You may go ahead when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Willie Jett, and I have the privilege of serving as the Commissioner of Education. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the Senate's Education Budget Omnibus Bill. Over the past 2 legislative sessions, we've worked together to pass impactful legislation that advanced Minnesota's education system in meaningful ways, supporting students, educators, families, schools, and communities across the state. We made foundational investments, including the implementation of an automatic inflator for the general education formula, providing districts with predictable, flexible funding year after year. We ensured no student will go hungry by providing free breakfast and lunch to all students during the school year. We invested in the special education and English learner cross-subsidies, increased compensatory revenue, advanced literacy through the READ Act, extended unemployment insurance to essential hourly workers during the summer months, and created a new aid to support hiring student support personnel statewide. Following the November forecast, and with additional clarity from the February forecast, a key challenge was laid before us. How do we preserve and strengthen our commitment to Minnesota's public education system while maintaining a balanced state budget? The proposals laid out in the governor's education bill address this, preserving our shared priorities for students and educators while taking a fiscally responsible approach. I'd like to thank you, Chair Kunesh, for including many of the governor's proposals in your bill. These include a continued investment in unemployment aid for hourly school workers, adjustments to student support personnel aid to stabilize funding for cooperatives, the transfer of the collaborative urban and greater Minnesota educators of color and teacher mentorship and retention grants to the Minnesota Department of Education. We also appreciate your inclusion of critical resources to support MDE's mission and capacity, such as strengthening our Office of Inspector General, expanding legal support for our nutrition and charter programs, and investing in financial analysis software, all central to the governor's anti-fraud and program integrity initiative. Funding for legal services will also ensure we have adequate resources to manage litigation on behalf of the state and maintain strong fiscal and legal oversight. Adjustment to MDE's Achievement and Integration Administrative Set-Aside will enhance our ability to support local education agencies in this vital work. While your bill takes a different approach from the governor's in some areas, we recognize and appreciate the inclusion of compensatory formula funding and the formation of compensatory revenue working group. Districts across Minnesota have voiced the need for reform in this area, and we are eager to continue partnering on long-term solutions. We also acknowledge the proposed reductions in the governor's bill were not made lightly, and we are grateful for the committee's meaningful and thoughtful approach to the difficult decisions involved in balancing the state's budget. I would like to raise a few concerns we do have with the bill. The automatic inflator to the general education formula enacted in 2023 was a significant investment that will fundamentally reshape how we support students, educators, and schools. This mechanism not only ensures schools receive essential funding increases, but it also brings predictability and stability during the budget planning. We urge the Senate to reconsider the proposed elimination of this inflator. Doing so would reverse one of the most significant achievements of the 2023 session. We also ask the committee to reconsider proposed reductions to Compass and MTSS funding, which are critical support for schools, and to restore funding for gender-neutral single-user restroom grants, an area where we've seen rising demand from across the state. And lastly, we continue to have concerns with the provision that would remove all required sign-offs from American Indian parent advisory committees when districts seek to carry forward American Indian education aid. This requirement reflects our commitment to meaningful consultation with tribal communities, and we urge its preservation. So in closing, I want to reiterate our appreciation for the inclusion of many of the governor's proposals and our shared recognition of the complex and urgent work ahead. With just over a month left in the session, we remain committed to working alongside you, building on our collective efforts to advance a thoughtful, responsible, and student-centered education system for Minnesota students. So thank you for your time and the opportunity to provide these comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brown has been called over to HHS. Oh, there you are. I probably was looking right at you. Well, please join us up at the table, and you may begin as soon as you're ready.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tiki Brown, and I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, was established during the 2023 session to bring together programs that better serve children, youth, and families across Minnesota. One of the key ways we do this is by bringing together early care and education programs from the Department of Education and Human Services so that we can take a holistic view of early care and education to better meet the needs of families and the developmental needs of children. Our system of early care and education relies on family child care, center child care, Head Start, and school-based early learning programs in order to meet the needs of families and children in Minnesota. Schools operate early learning programs often at a deficit and are supplemented by their own general funds in order to meet the needs of their communities and to build early and positive relationships with the families they will serve for years in the future. This is especially true for voluntary pre-kindergarten programs who receive 0.6 ADM that supports only a partial day for 4-year-olds, despite families often needing a full day of programming. Understanding the multifaceted nature of our early care and education system, I appreciate the committee's continued base funding for a number of school-based early learning programs. I do, however, have concerns about the implications of eliminating the link to inflation for those funded through the general education formula. Eliminating the link to inflation will make it harder for schools to operate these programs and ensure a system of early care and education that families rely on. I also want to raise concerns about eliminating the Early Childhood Teacher Shortage Grant Program. Early childhood teachers in school-based programs will be required to have a PELSB-issued license beginning in 2028. This licensing requirement passed in 2023 and has had positive implications for instruction quality, but without support to increase the number of licensed early educators, it will be even more difficult for schools to staff these programs. Any loss to early care and education opportunities for children and families is a loss to our entire state and a setback from all the progress that we have made. I appreciate the committee's support of these programs and support of our youngest learners, and for allowing me the opportunity to share comments today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We are going to begin testifying. We have a huge list, and so we've asked you to keep it to about a minute. Right now, or in just a minute, I'm going to invite Principal Rolfs, who is online, to begin his presentation. In the meantime, would Dr. Alstrom, Principal Rick Bale, and Ms. Briggs come to the table. And when we're done with that, we will hear from a student, Jenny Wen, on remote. And then we'll just keep filling that table as quickly as possible so that we can get through all of this. You will hear a little sound that will let you know that your time has expired. And so, Principal Rolfs, if you would like to share your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee for allowing me to testify today. I'm Peter Russ. I'm the pre-K through 12th grade principal at St. Mary's School in Sleepy Eye. I'm here to speak about the proposed cuts in non-public aid. We are in our 142nd year at St. Mary's. Our past students have tremendously impacted our community and across Minnesota. The success of St. Mary's is built on the dedication of many individuals, past and present, and importantly, your support as members of the legislature, as we have received non-public aid for decades from this body. We are grateful for that. Our students have gone on to make meaningful contributions in society. But Madam Chair and committee members, our continued success is at risk. The proposed cuts to non-public aid will significantly affect our ability to serve our students and our community. Specifically, cutting the aid to transportation and counseling will be extremely detrimental to our students. Reliable and safe transportation is vital for our families, and not having it will negatively impact them financially and logistically. Cutting funding from counseling resources would leave many students without the guidance they need at this crucial time. That's why I urge you, members of the committee, to continue to be part of our success formula in other schools by continuing aid to non-publics. Thank you for your time and consideration. We need more than ever to help. We need you more than ever to help raise our children well. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Rolfs. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Alstrom. If you would introduce yourself for the record, and you have 1 minute.
Chair Kunesh and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dan Alstrom, and I am the head of school at Heilacher Jewish Day School. Today, I'm here to strongly oppose the removal of funding and statutory languages that enable essential non-public pupil aid and support. It has been an especially stressful time for the Jewish community over the last few years, and many of our families come to our schools because they want to feel safe. Yet the rise of anti-Semitism has caused great anxiety in our students and our families, and having non-public pupil aid for counseling services, provides strong support, and early intervention is a benefit to everyone. The vast majority of Highlander students graduate into nearby public school districts. Beyond a solid general education, we need non-public aid to prepare our kids for their high school careers. They need to learn to be resilient against the trauma of social media and Jewish stereotypes. By eliminating or even reducing non-public pupil aid, we are setting up our
Thank
kids.
you, Dr. Ahlstrom. I'm sorry, but I have to
Are we
cut
out?
you off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Principal Rick Bale.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of our teachers, nurses, counselor, parents, and students. My name is Kyle Rickball. I'm the principal of St. Joseph's Catholic School in West St. Paul, home of the very famous folk song West St. Paul that you can find on YouTube. And similar to other Catholic schools, we have a very diverse population of students that represent our community in West St. Paul. We're also economically diverse, with 40% of our students receiving financial aid. Our students benefit so greatly from this non-public per pupil aid for textbooks and transportation. We have a nurse in the building 5 days a week and a school counselor for a day and a half every week to meet the needs of over 400 students. What worries me is this budget proposal has its biggest impact on the poorest students that attend this school. If this passes, we either have to cut our services to some of our most needy service students or raise tuition by a significant percent, which will disproportionately impact the poorest students that we serve. These are families we love to serve, we want to serve, and if they leave our school, it passes on that burden to taxpayers to pick up the bill. It puts us as a school between a rock and a hard place that the aid we receive allows for the amazing work our counselors and nurses do. Thank you for your time, Madam.
Thank you, Principal. Next, we'll hear from Kat Briggs.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Kat Briggs, and I'm a school bus driver for Independent School District 196. I'm grateful that you chose to fund unemployment compensation for education support professionals like me. Driving a bus isn't an easy job. We're basically driving a one-room schoolhouse through traffic. It's extra tough in the summer, and not just because there is no air conditioning. During summer school, I work 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. That is 16 hours of work, and of course, there's no work in the weeks of no school. It is no coincidence that the fall after the UI law was changed, the first time in a long time, you did not hear about the back-to-school staffing crisis in the news. It's easier to retain staff, especially new drivers, and hard-to-fill summer jobs like summer school. Now that school workers won't be asked to go from financial crisis to financial crisis. As this bill makes its way through the process, I encourage you to try and find additional resources to fund UI in the out years, either through levy authority or aid. As a conservative and a farmer, I'm skeptical of property taxes, but giving districts the authority to use their UI levy does not require them to use it.
Ms. Briggs, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you so much for being
time.
here again today and for your service to the students.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a student, Jenny Wen, online. And then if Laura Carpenter, Arsima Musfun, is also a student, excuse me, and Zulida Hernandez would come to the table, then we can be prepared for the next round of testimony. Ms. Wen, if you would like to introduce yourself, and you may begin when you're ready. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Wen, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Yep, there you go.
All right, I hope you guys can hear me now.
Yep, we hear you.
Chair and the members of the committee, my name is Jenny Wen, and I'm a current senior at Jefferson High School. I'm testifying today because I'm concerned about the cuts towards computer science education grants in the governor's revised budget. I help run a coding club at the local middle school with my friend, and I see how the lack of consistent computer science education affects our students. Because there isn't widespread equal access to computer science instruction, the students in our club are all at very different levels. This makes it difficult for us to teach effectively and even harder to create a shared sense of excitement around the subject or any projects that we lead them through. These early gaps in access means that by the time students are given the opportunity to learn, they're already behind. This can take their confidence and interest in the subject and could potentially lead to worse career outcomes in the long run. I understand the budget is tight, but at the very least, I hope we can maintain a full-time computer science supervisor at the Minnesota Department of Education. Without someone in that role, it becomes much harder for schools to get the guidance they need and even harder for students to access the kind of education that prepares them for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wen. You were right on the dot. All right, Ms. Carpenter is next. If you'd introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Laura Carpenter. I'm an organizer for SEIU. I was a former school nutrition worker, and today I'm here as a mom of a student who receives special education services. Thank you for fully funding unemployment for school workers for the next 2 years. For most of my kids' education, they had to tearfully say goodbye to the para they'd grown close to when that para left for a different job in the summer and wouldn't be coming back in the fall. Because of unemployment insurance, the summer of 2023 was the first time my kids' education that they didn't have to say goodbye to their para at the end of the school year. In fact, she actually worked with them during summer school and then got UI during the weeks that summer school doesn't exist in our district. Over those 2 years, my child had the same para. They made tons of progress. That was their 4th and 5th year of school, and 4th and 5th grade, and that's when they became a reader. It was a really big deal. How do you individualize an education for a student's needs when you don't know the student? Consistency and relationship are so key. Having the same para allowed my child to access their education in a new way. These are important jobs. They make a huge difference in our kids' lives. Every time I get a call from school that something has gone wrong for my child, it's because they were understaffed. Before UI, they were constantly understaffed, frequently starting the school year.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off, but thank you very much for being here and sharing your story.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Arsima Mesfin. If you would state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Madam Chair, members of community, my name is Arsima Mesfin, and I'm an 8th grader.
Would you please speak a little closer to the microphone? Your voice is very soft.
Madam Chair, members of committee, my name is Arsima Mesfin, and I'm an 8th grader at St. John Paul II Catholic School in Northeast Minneapolis. My parents chose this school because they wanted us to have a good education with a small learning environment where we would get more attention for our learning needs. They also liked how my school helped immigrant families access a good education. My school also helped me learn English, which took a lot of years so I could be prepared for high school and eventually go to college to become a nurse. My mom currently helps cleans for the nurses at Hennepin Healthcare, so maybe one day my mom would work with me. JP2 has helped me and my family choose a high school option that would work for me and give me the best chance to go to college. This wouldn't have happened without my school's support and the support of the guidance counseling program. I can't imagine my middle school experience would have been like without my counselor. I also live in Minneapolis and take the bus each day. Without transportation, there is no way my family would able to choose JP2. I know that my parents pay tuition, and if tuition is too high, they couldn't afford the school. We bus with the local public school Las Estrellas. I understand why our busing would be cut when we share it with them, and they would continue to get busing. I feel like this is a punishment to me just because my parents chose a different school. This is why I hope you oppose any cuts to funding non-public pupil aids for all Minnesotans like me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And next we have Ms. Hernandez.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Leida. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am a parent of Pope John Paul II. I'm very proud of. We have been at Pope John Paul for 12 years. I have 4 children there, 3 of them graduate 8th grade in that school. We choose Pope John Paul, like many parents, if you choose a private education because of the services and support that they give to our children. I could speak endlessly about all the support that my children have received in this school and their individual needs. When it comes middle income families like us and many others, removing transportation and these needed services that our children receive is going to be a detriment to us and many, many families. As a parent, I know one size doesn't fit the approach to education within the same family, and children thrive in different environments, and I hope we all know that these services are needed. I wanted to say so much, but when it comes to when we call a paramedic, we expect that ambulance to come with the tools that they need to provide us with that help. When we go to a hospital, we expect to have those services, basic services, to provide us with what we need. And in the school, we know that these are services that our children need.
Ms. Hernandez, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off. Thank you so much, though. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Michelle Kramer, remote. And so I would invite Tony Sana, Anita Davis, and William Schwant up to the table and prepare for your testimony. Dr. Kramer, if you'd like to begin, please introduce yourself first, and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Kramer, and I am the superintendent of the Catholic Diocese of New Ulm, and I'm speaking in opposition to the cuts that are proposed for the non-public pupil aid. We have 13 schools in our very rural diocese, and at this time, we do have a state statute that honors equity among our students, whether they're in public or non-public schools. And that means our state affirms that regardless of the school they attend, our students deserve to have their basic needs met. And that includes things like transportation and textbook funding. Because of the nature of our rural schools, transportation is a necessity for most of our students, and that elimination would undoubtedly create a great challenge for both the non-public schools students and the districts. Non-public school students in our area ride the very same buses that their public school counterparts do. And so with eliminating this aid, the public system will not receive the funding for the non-publics, but they'll still be running the same routes. So it'll still be a major challenge for them to be able to make budget. Also, I would ask you to consider that
Ms. Kramer?
There are students.
Ms. Kramer, I'm
Yep.
sorry, but your time is up, so I'm sorry to have to
Thank
cut
you.
you off. Yep. Mr. Sana, if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tony Sane, CEO of the Sane Foundation. I do have a handout here, but in interest of time, I'll keep going, and hopefully they can pass it out. We've enjoyed a partnership with the state over the last 8 years. We've been really good at leveraging the resources that you've provided us. When we started, we were a $1.8 million organization. With your funds, we've leveraged those funds to become a $9.5 million organization, allowing us to do more across the state. We supply mentors in schools, and they stepped up during COVID when you needed us most, highlighted by actually doing home visits, supportive services, and we actually did deliver over 3 million pounds of food when the community needed us. When funds are low, I think being fiscally efficient is important. Our staff helps with school safety. We know mentors is the largest protector against mental health challenges. We do academic support and out-of-school time learning, and we also train people into the educational system. We hope that you consider this. This does not feel very good through this partnership. When we've worked so hard and to support our staff, and in a short amount of time, hearing that it may go away. So please consider your support of us in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Sana, and thank you for the work that you've done in our communities. Next, we have Anita Davis. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and you may begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Anita Davis, and I'm the principal at Holy Trinity Catholic School in South St. Paul. Thank you for allowing me to testify today in opposition to the proposed cuts for non-public aid. Holy Trinity is a smaller school, and our students benefit tremendously from non-public aid. This funding has direct and positive impact on their education, providing essential resources such as textbooks, testing, nursing services, and transportation. One of our most pressing needs is funding for textbooks, particularly to support our students with reading and math. Textbooks are fundamental to our students' ability to develop literacy and numeracy skills. Without these resources, our students are at a disadvantage. We know that a strong education at a young age is directly correlated with becoming successful adults and contributing citizens. This funding is essential to ensure that all students, regardless of their school choice, have the tools they need to succeed. Non-public school families pay taxes too, and it only seems fair that their children have equal access to these vital resources. Cutting this funding would deny some students the resources they need to succeed. This is unjust and unfair to those students, and I hope that everyone would recognize the inequality of such a proposal. Non-public aid has been a long-standing commitment from the state, and it is crucial for the continued success of all our students.
Ms. Davis.
I ask that you please do not cut this fund, and thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Mr. Schwant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is William Schwant. I'm a special education paraprofessional and the local president for the Bloomington Federation of Paraprofessionals. I'm here today to testify in favor of continued state funding for unemployment insurance. Hourly school employees are grossly underpaid. Access to unemployment provides needed income when there's not an opportunity to work in the summer. Since the passage of unemployment insurance, the hourly school employees began, we in Bloomington have seen an approximate 20% reduction in turnover during the summer. The fact that we are no longer hearing about staffing shortages in the news is evidence that UI is helping with that problem. Consistency of employees from year to year is a benefit to students in their learning. It also saves the costs associated with hiring and onboarding new employees in the district. Lately, the news is full of stories of districts who are cutting their budgets. I know from listening to testimony in the House, unemployment insurance is a concern and being blamed in part for these cuts. While unemployment costs in my district would amount to less than 1% of their total budget.
Mr. Schwan, I'm going to have to cut you off, but
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Tony Simons, who is going to come into us remotely. But if Mary Sostek, Russ Gregg, and Joe Billings would come up to the table and get ready to go, that'd be great. So, Mr. Simmons, if you would like to begin, just introduce yourself and your testimony.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tony Simmons, and I'm the Executive Director at High School for Recording Arts in St. Paul, Minnesota. At High School for Recording Arts, we have been serving some of the most marginalized and vulnerable youth in the state of Minnesota for over 27 years. We are a re-engagement school in that we seek out young people who are out of school with the intention to reconnect them to learning so that they can achieve a high school diploma and be on a career track. We've been very successful in doing this in terms of having an 85% one-year graduation rate, which is important for re-engagement. 100% of our young people going to college have a 100% college graduate acceptance rate. And although 65% are just as involved when they enroll at High School for Recording Arts, that goes down to 11% when they graduate, breaking the school-to-prison pipeline for these young people. The $132 charter school facility cut would mean we would lose teachers and facilitators, especially our advisors and student support personnel who build strong student relationships that support our young people's pathway to a diploma and address student mental health needs. They also contribute to an environment of school safety. All public schools should...
Mr. Simmons, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to end there. But thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll have Mary Sostek.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Mary Stosic, and I'm a center-based special education teacher for students with emotional behavior disorders in Bloomington. Our education support professionals have a vital role in our districts. They are often caring for our most challenging students, yet they're often the least paid and least trained people in our school community. Paraprofessionals are critical to providing the best supportive educational environments for our students. As a special education teacher of 15 years and an ESP for 5 years before that, I could not do my job without utilizing the talents of my staff. In fact, my classroom couldn't function without my staff. We need to ensure ESPs continue to have access to a benefit every other seasonal worker has access to, unemployment insurance between terms. The amount of work that ESPs do requires an intensive amount of systematic support and planning. Before these workers had access to unemployment insurance, we would lose many of them over the summer to higher paying jobs, requiring me to start all over in the new school year. Since the legislature gave these workers access to this benefit, I've seen ESPs return in greater numbers at the beginning of the year. ESPs do not make my job possible as a special education teacher. Or don't make it possible for me to do my job. They're absolutely essential.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mr. Gregg.
Chair Kunesh and members of the committee, my name is Russ Gregg, and I'm the founder of Hope Academy, a faith-based school in South Minneapolis serving 700 low-income scholars who are brought to and from school each day on 15 buses. Hope scholars have some of the highest reading and math scores of Black and brown children in our state. One of those scholars is a third grader named Kendall. Kendall's mother, Damara, is a single parent who lives just south of Lake Street. She's a working mom who's also taking classes. Damara doesn't own a car. She's trying to do right by giving her daughter the remarkable education that she didn't receive herself, and Kendall's already reading up a storm. However, Damara's only way to get Kendall to school is on the bus that our state currently provides. Recently, Damara told me that removing busing from her daughter would be devastating. Damara also relies on our state's textbook aid to pay for the consumable textbooks to support her daughter's evidence-based instruction. One of our recent graduates said that the full ride scholarship he received would have been impossible without the college counseling he received with state funds. And lastly, state funds currently provide a licensed nurse to our scholars 2 days a week, keeping our scholars current on their immunizations, overseeing their hearing and eyesight screenings, and keeping them informed of public health threats. Please reconsider eliminating these vital benefits from the most vulnerable members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Next, we have Mr. Billings.
Good morning, Chair Kunesh and members. My name is Joseph Billings, and I lead school operations at Perdeo Academy. Families choose our public charter school because we provide a rigorous education that prepares our students to become productive, innovative members of Minnesota's workforce. We're working hard to meet our students' needs as costs continue to rise. In the last 6 months, our facilities maintenance costs have increased by more than 10%. The proposed cuts to facilities funding would reduce our budget by over $150,000 annually. That would mean cutting from classrooms to fill the gap. Unlike districts, we don't have access to local levies, so we rely on state funding to maintain our facilities. As we all know, schools are not just bricks and mortar. They're where kids chase their curiosities, where parents connect with one another, and where communities come together. We understand these decisions are difficult, and we're grateful for your leadership. We're asking that you take another look at the budget and preserve long-term facilities maintenance funding for public charter schools. Our students deserve fair funding and well-maintained school buildings to support their learning and growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Next, we are going to go remote and hear from David Parker. But in the meantime, if Ann Case, Shannon Peterson, and Darcy Stuber would come to the table and prepare for their testimony, that would be great. Mr. Parker, if you would like to introduce yourself, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is David Parker, and I'm Vice President of Research and Development at Serve Minnesota, our state's AmeriCorps Commission. I want to first thank you, Madam Chair, and the staff for including the Minnesota Reading Corps appropriation in this committee's budget. We believe this makes sense, given Reading Corps is an effective part of the READ Act and the state's approach to supporting students' grades K through 3 in literacy. We also want to thank the committee and Senator Gustafson in particular for including the one-time Math Corps appropriation increase. We know you had a challenging budget target, and the fact that you see value in Math Corps means we will meet more of the demand for the program across Minnesota, and most importantly, more students will get the individualized supports they need to get back on track for math success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Case, if you would like to introduce yourself, and you may begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Ann Castee, K-12 Outreach Coordinator at Minitex and former school librarian, and I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Library Association. Thank you for including funding for eLibrary Minnesota and policy changes to improve school library aid in the bill. ELM is one of the most powerful educational tools in our state. It provides access to high-quality subscription-based e-resources like full access to newspapers, early literacy materials, peer-reviewed journals, and test prep software to every Minnesotan. It does this seamlessly through a statewide portal with no logins, just geolocation. This digital infrastructure is something individual schools and libraries could not afford to replicate on their own, and thanks to Minitex's rigorous bid process, which includes educator needs assessment and requires competitive vendor pricing proposals, Minnesota gets maximum value for every dollar spent. Increased funding for ELM will allow this vital program to continue and update its offerings. Without an increase, ELM will face cuts to resources that schools and communities already rely on. I also want to lift up the importance of policy modifications to school library aid to ensure it is used as it was intended. School library media specialists are often the very people who teach students how to use ELM to find accurate information, think critically, and prepare for college. A strong school library program strengthens ELM's impact. Together, they create a robust learning ecosystem that supports every Minnesota student. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your message. Ms. Peterson, if you'd like to begin.
Yeah, I'm Shannon Peterson, Director of Leela, a charter school in Forest Lake. Good morning, Chair Kunesh and members. As you finalize SF 2255, I also ask that you retain long-term facilities maintenance aid for charter schools. Leela attracts 1,400 students from 20 communities to our language immersion and IB program, and our students thrive. Yet we struggle financially. We must compete with better funded district schools for hard-to-hire language immersion teachers. Over the past 20 years, I've seen the funding gap grow between charters and district public schools. Yet we've made it work despite this growing inequity because increasingly we have lower salaries. Cuts like this could push us past the breaking point. If this bill passes as is, the gap for Leela will grow by another $180,000 each year. That's not just a line item. At Leela, that's a cut to staff. That's a lot of students who won't get the instruction they need in classes that are too big. One middle school student new to our school recently told our counselor, "Leela is the first place I've ever felt like I belonged." That doesn't happen by accident. It takes staff. And right now, we're already stretched thin.
Going to have to end you there, but thank you very much. Next, Darcy Stuber.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Darcy Stieber, and I serve as Public Policy Chair for the Minnesota School Nutrition Association, or MSNA. MSNA is generally neutral on the proposed changes to the nutrition fund balance language. However, we want to express some caution, particularly regarding amendments that could further expand the allowable use of these funds. We are concerned that the language expanding the use of these funds for reconfiguration or remodeling is too vague and could be widely interpreted, possibly at the expense of core nutrition program improvements. Additionally, we're concerned about the amendments that have the potential for districts to take debt for a large building addition or remodeling of projects. This could place long-term financial strain on school nutrition programs. With just 1 year of data with the Universal Meals Program, districts have not yet had time to sufficient time to assess the needs of their nutrition programs. Areas where surplus dollars could be used, such as equipment upgrades, expanded menu options, and staff compensation, are still being evaluated. We strongly recommend moving forward cautiously and taking a slowed approach.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for feeding our children. Next, we have Laura Freer, who is going to join us remotely, and then I would ask Tamara Ratcliffe, Katina Taylor, and Lyle Koski to please come to the table and prepare for your testimony. Ms. Freer, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning, members. My name is Laura Freer, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Association of Alternative Programs and the principal at Fairview Alternative High School within Roseville Area Schools. Thank you for the opportunity for me to testify today. The Minnesota Association of Alternative Programs is an organization that advocates for, supports, and promotes alternative learning programs in Minnesota. We have over 800 members with over 300 alternative learning programs around the state. Our programs strive to meet the needs of nearly 150,000 Minnesota students who experience difficulty in traditional classrooms and receive alternative education services. Thank you for your continued support for students in alternative settings with the inclusion of ALC transportation aid and recovery program grants. We understand that you have difficult decisions ahead of you in putting together a budget. Nevertheless, we have some concerns with delinking of general education fund formula funding and inflation. Our schools are chronically underfunded, and alternative settings often feel this most acutely. Research and program data consistently show our students face higher barriers to academic success, including trauma, mental health challenges, and interrupted educational pathways. Despite this,
Ms. Freer, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We'll move on to Ms. Ratcliffe. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and you may begin.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tammy Ratcliffe, head of schools at Duluth Edison Charter Schools. I have the privilege of serving staff, students, and family within our schools for 25 years. Duluth Edison is dedicated to the achievement of academic and personal excellence, serving students in pre-K through 8th grade. We have the most diverse population within the Duluth area, with 32% students of color, 28% receive special education, and 51% of students are in poverty. In our most recent survey, students come to Duluth Edison for a variety of reasons, including academic excellence, specialists, special education, and relationships with staffs. Test scores don't change that climate and culture. Climate and culture change test scores. Creating a culture of inclusiveness and building relationships with students and families is a key component. Currently, chartered public schools receive $132 per pupil. This funding goes directly into the school general operating budget and is used to provide direct services. As a leader, I need to ask myself, what should I do? Should I reduce staff impacting the culture and climate, or should I reduce staff who support academic teaching and support the means for these students? This means laying off.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you.
Yep. Ms. Taylor, if you'd like to begin.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Katina Taylor, President of the Educational Support Professionals Chapter of the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers and Educational Support Professionals. I am here for SF 2255 and to share the experiences of educational support professionals with the state's unemployment insurance program, which was expanded to include hourly school workers in 2023. The state of Minnesota decided to extend the same benefits enjoyed by construction workers for decades to hourly school workers, a group that is mostly women and most racially diverse group in nearly every school. For that, ESPs, thank you. And for the legislators who were in office in 2023, I want to thank you for appropriating more than $135 million for this benefit. It has never been an unfunded mandate. This is a program worth extending for schools, for ESPs, and for students. It used to be common for school districts to lose some of their best educational support professionals over the summer as ESPs found other work, which usually paid better than schools. Now that ESPs can pay their rent and feed their children over the summer, school districts see less turnover because—
Ms. Taylor, we do have to finish. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. Next, we'll have Mr. Koski.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Lyle Koski. I'm a member of the Leela Advocates Group. We're a group of volunteers who want to spread the wonderful things that's going on in Leela. Our major concern is the possibility of the long-term facilities maintenance aid being reduced from schools. Leela is thin. It runs wonderful programs, but it cannot continue with its major cuts. I'm a recovering high school administrator. I understand budget cuts. I understand the challenges of changing and resetting priorities and accepting sacrifices and cutting programs. Please, two words that we always use in looking at this was fairness and appropriateness. Is it fair and appropriate to place the burden of this financial challenge on the backs of public school students, more specifically public charter school students, when the only real difference is that these families made a conscious choice of where public school meets their needs? Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much. Next, we will go remotely to Henry Shanson, and then we will hear from Executive Director Warsami, Julie Lundgren, and Katie Avina. If you'd like to join us at the table. And Mr. Shanson, if you would like to begin, please introduce yourself first.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Henry Shanson. I'm the head of school at Bluffy Montessori School in Winona. Relative to charter long-term facilities maintenance funding, this cut will have a direct and negative impact on our students. Please know that every dollar you take away here will have to be made up somewhere else in the form of services, teachers, and support staff. Bluffview is very fortunate to have a 41,000 square foot facility that was built to be a Montessori school. It serves our students very well. The building is 25 years old now, and it needs maintenance. In my role, I put a great value on being a good steward of public money. This summer, we have to put a new roof on the building. It can't be kicked down the road any longer. It's a $150,000 project. That's how I use this money. We've been squirreling it away for 10 years just to make sure we can do this without having to take out a loan, without having to affect staffing and student services. If this money is removed, that money will come directly from the services given to students. That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Warsami, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning, Chair Kunesh and committee members. I'm Abdurrashid Warsami. I'm the Executive Director of Twin Cities International Schools. We serve over 1,000 students, mostly bilingual learners and first-generation Americans. And our mission to provide rigorous and education for every child. Our students are making a significant growth in English proficiency, but they rely on a small class size, language support, and counseling service. Proposed budget cut will directly harm our students' large class size, fewer teachers, less support, interventions, those who need and must. We risk widening the opportunity gap. We understand the hard choice you face. Today, I urge you to protect and target funding to the students who need it most. Our kids, our Minnesota future are counting on it. Thank you for your time and your commitment to the public education.
Thank you, Mr. Warsame. Next, we'll hear from Julie Lundgren.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm Julie Lundgren, the Chief Financial Officer at Lakes International Language Academy. As CFO, I use my intellect and heart to leverage every dollar to benefit students and teachers. Each spring, I revise the current budget and build next year's budget. It's challenging and intense. Every budget line impacts staff or students. I listen carefully to leadership to understand needs and goals. I feel the pressure, much as you might right now in your budgeting process, except I know every face it impacts. The state proposes the elimination of long-term facilities maintenance aid for chartered public schools and for those schools alone. This year, we receive $182,000 of LTFM aid, equal to 3 teachers. Chartered public school students already bear the impact of an existing significant funding inequity. In anticipation of eroding federal support, I'm modeling budgets that have no title funding. I'm projecting inflationary increases. We need the state to have our backs right now. Please retain LTFM aid for charters. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lundgren. And next, Ms. Avina.
Good morning. My name is Katie Grohle Avina. I'm Associate Superintendent at Academias La Paz, a bilingual dual immersion public charter school serving 580 students. At Academia, we are student-centered and rooted in excellence, dignity, and opportunity. We are developing lifelong learners and authentic, powerful human beings. 95% of our students are Latino, 10% of our students experience homelessness, 16% of our students receive special education services, and 76% of our students are English language learners. And yet 100% of our seniors have been accepted into post-secondary institutions. 20% of our students are accessing PSEO classes and concurrent enrollment, and 10% of our students in first and fourth grade were accepted and attend programming at the Minnesota Institute for Talented Youth. Our teachers and staff work relentlessly to offer this education and to serve one of the fastest growing and historically marginalized communities in the state. But if proposed funding cuts to LTFM move forward, will face real consequences, teacher layoffs, and critical loss of programming. I'm not asking for more funding, I'm asking for fair funding. Chair Kunesh and committee members, thank you for all the work that you do. I recognize that you're facing incredible, difficult decisions in uncertain times, but I'm asking you to please protect our students and revisit your budget targets. They deserve equitable funding and the opportunity to thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Avina. We're going to go, our time is up, but we have approximately 15 more speakers. If everyone sticks to that minute or so, we can get through all of these in the next 15 minutes if folks want to stick around. I know we have caucus right now, and I don't know what the GOP has planned in the next 15 minutes, but we'll try to get through all of these testifiers. So remotely, we have Tracy Quarnstrom, and then would Mariel Calhane, Jason Morrison, and Brett Wedland please come to the table and get ready to go. And so, Ms. Quarnstrom, if you would like to begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Kunesh and committee members. I'm Tracy Hornstrom. I'm the Executive Director at Minnesota Online High School. I know our time is limited. I thank you for taking the time today to hear from us. I'm here in direct opposition to eliminating the long-term facilities maintenance aid for charter schools. I work at a charter school that enrolls students with a lack of credits, students who are behind. Our mission is to bring joy of learning back to students and have a responsible, trusted adult in their lives. To do that, we need to do one-on-one funding. I'll be right to the point. If we do not get this funding, I will be eliminating a half-time guidance counselor and a half-time social worker. And please, I'm begging you to understand that right now students need these supports, and I ask you to go back and look at your budgets. Know it's a difficult time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Quarnstrom. Next, we'll go to Ms. Calhane.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kunesh and committee members. My name is Mariel Colhane, and I am the Charter Operations Partner at Minnesota Wildflower Montessori Charter School, a teacher-led, intentionally small public Montessori school. At MWMS, we serve children ages 3 through 4th grade across 3 schools located in Senator Pappas and Senator Fateh's district. Grounded in equity and compassion, we support a diverse community of families. I'm here today to share our opposition to the proposed cuts in the long-term facilities maintenance revenue. Under the proposed plan, we would lose $5,000, which for a small school like ours, it is extremely meaningful. These dollars help us maintain clean, safe, and well-functioning learning spaces. The loss of these funds will jeopardize the environments that help children thrive. It will delay needed repairs or redirect funds away from classroom materials and student support. It will have a direct impact on our students who also deserve safe, quality schools. Our request is simple and grounded in fairness. Ensure that all public school students in Minnesota are supported equitably, regardless of the type of school they attend.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I have to end you there. Next, we have Mr. Morrison.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jason Morrison. I'm the president of Cristo Rey Jesuit High School in the Phillips neighborhood of Minneapolis. I'd like to tell you about our school and who will be impacted by the proposed cuts should they go through. Cristo Rey Jesuit High School serves 413 students in grades 9 through 12, 100% of whom are youth of color. Almost 2/3 of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Our average family household income is $56,000, and almost 75% of our students live in multilingual homes. Every student receives financial assistance, and every student earns a portion of their tuition through an innovative work-study program. For the majority of our students, they will be the first to attend college, and we're changing the trajectory of youth of color in Minnesota, as 100% have been accepted to college every year since our first graduating class. Our average daily attendance rate is 93%, which far exceeds that of the state, and safe, reliable transportation should not be a barrier for any student to access their education. For the majority of our families, this is the only way their children can get to school. And the wraparound supports provided through counseling and nursing provided are the only access to these services. Thank you, and I hope you will consider opposing the cuts.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. And then we have Mr. Wedlund.
Thank you, Chair Kunesh and committee members. My name is Brett Wedlund. I'm the Executive Director of Nova Classical Academy in St. Paul. The funding inequity faced by charter schools is not a secret. This is not the fault of anyone here today. It's simply the reality we face. We're grateful to receive the 2.74% increase to the funding formula for the upcoming school year. However, the bill in front of you includes a $132 per pupil cut to long-term facilities maintenance revenue for charter schools. The impact of this is simple. For charter schools, that 2.74% increase will feel like a 0.94% increase. Let me say it again. For charter schools, it's going to feel like we receive less than a 1% increase. The only place we can make that up is from services that directly impact our students' learning. I respectfully ask that you reconsider your budget targets and seek ways to meet them that do not harm our students by widening an already existing funding inequity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we are going to hear from Scott Manny remotely, and so would Tim Benz, Scott Kroonquist, and Paul Wirtz please come to the table. And Mr. Manny, you may begin.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair and committee. I'm from North Star Elementary here in the Rock Ridge Public Schools up on the Iron Range, and I ask that you oppose the delete all amendment on SF 2255 to remove star-based funding. Those of us that are in the rural districts here on the Iron Range have very limited access to high-level STEM programming, and star-based is amazing, and it's amazing for our kids. We're cutting $2.5 million, but we are not cutting our transportation to star-based because that's how strongly our families and our school district feel and what it can do for kids. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity and for your message. Mr. Benz, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning, Chair Kunesh and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Tim Benz. I'm president of Independent. We are an organization that represents 181 non-public schools and 41,000 students. I'm here to oppose the elimination of non-public pupil aids and non-public transportation services. Nearly 73,000 students attend non-public schools in Minnesota. Regardless of past budget deficits, legislative makeup, or executive branch, these services have never been proposed for elimination over the past 5 decades. I ask what has changed and why now? The challenges and needs of all our students today are much greater than they were 50 years ago. Should these proposals advance, the term non-public will be removed from the statutes that guide these services. What does that say for families who make a choice for no other reason that that might be the best fit for their child? Frankly, it's short-sighted and wrong. Please protect these crucial, critical, essential services and not exclude students just because they attend a non-public school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benz. And next, Mr. Kroonquist.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Scott Krunquist with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, also testifying on behalf of MASA and MSBA. I'm going to quickly highlight a few provisions that impact funding stability. Number one, thank you for the hold harmless funding to prevent a devastating reduction in compensatory revenue for many districts. The funding for unemployment insurance aid is critical, with many districts facing major budget challenges. Allowing elected school boards to renew an capital projects referendum one time adds stability to the system. We are deeply disappointed, however, with delinking the formula from inflation. Much has been said about the investments in education last biennium. The very centerpiece of those investments was finally linking the formula to inflation. I shudder to think about where our districts would be today had the formula not been linked to inflation. Finally, we appreciate that the changes to literacy formula will not be effective until 27, but the simple reality is all districts need more financial support to implement the READ Act, and under this change, many would see a reduction in literacy aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kronquist. And next we have Mr. Weirs.
Thank you, Chair Kunesh and members of the Senate Education Finance Committee. I'm Paul Wirtz, State Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. I'm here today on behalf of the AHA to express support for Senate File 2255, legislation that includes a provision regarding requiring schools to develop cardiac emergency response plans for schools. This legislation will save lives. With thousands of students enrolled in Minnesota's public schools and charter schools, plus numerous staff, it's important for school facilities to have a plan in place to address cardiac arrest. These plans not only benefit the students and staff, but the number of community members, parents, and supporters that come to school for events and other meetings every day. The AHA expresses our support to Senator Bonnie Westland for authoring this important legislation and extends our appreciation for the inclusion of this language in this omnibus bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wirtz. Next, we'll hear from Josh Downham, Matt Shaver, and Jim Davney. And if Joey Sinane, Sarah Burt, and Sam Walseth would be ready to replace those, when they're done speaking, we can finish quickly and efficiently. So, Mr. Downham, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh Downham, Minneapolis Schools. I'm also testifying on behalf of St. Paul Public Schools. We just want to thank the committee for including the provision on compensatory revenue to address the undercounting of students who are eligible. That really helps. I know we're going to be making a few more adjustments to that, but really appreciate that provision. Also appreciate the increase in the cross-subsidy reduction aid for EL and special ed students. That's one of the areas where we have some of the greatest disparities. We do have serious concerns about the delinking of the formula from inflation. And really, as we look at some of the uncertainty and what's happening at the federal level, having a stable, predictable state funding system is really that much more important. Had we not had the 2.74% increase in our formula for next school year, MPS would have been putting out a lot more layoff notices, and we've lost a lot of really good people. It would have been much worse without that linking. So appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Downham. Mr. Shaver.
Chair Kunesh, members of the committee, good morning. Matt Shaver, Senior Policy Director at Allies. We're advocates for students. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Chair's Omnibus bill. We're excited to see student-centered proposals to improve how literacy aid is sent to schools, reasonable next steps with nearly $2 billion in compensatory revenue, plus the proposed working group, as well as the expansion of uses for student support personnel aid to include educators working to address chronic absenteeism. We're also glad to see ongoing funding for universal meals, over $17 billion in unrestricted per pupil funding to schools, ongoing investments in cross-subsidy reductions, the Chair rejecting the Governor's proposals to cut funding to special education transportation, and harmful cuts to special education tuition reimbursement. And as this bill works its way through a difficult budget process, we just encourage decision makers to prioritize protecting funding that most directly impacts students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. And now, former Chair Davney.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Thank you. I'm Jim Davney. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Alliance with Youth. We're Minnesota's only statewide program focused on student attendance. I want to thank you for the inclusion of Article 3, Sections 10 through 12, that provide flexibility in the use of student support aid. This is a creative approach meeting the needs of students, allowing targeted flexibility in the use of those funds dedicated to student attendance. It responds to the crisis of chronic absenteeism in the state while doing so within the Minnesota tradition of local control. I urge you to think of this initiative as contributing to the future of the student support field. The majority of our members serving in schools have something less than a college degree. but they have aspirations. 62% indicate an interest of a post-service career in education. 33% of those in the student support field. They indicate a broad interest in the variety of those fields. And in fact, next year, participants in our Promise Fellow Youth Mental Health Corps will have the opportunity to enroll in the Century College Behavioral and Mental Health program, providing certification in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Dabney. I have to stop there. Okay, we have Joy Sinane, Sarah Burt, and Sam Walseth. And you may begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joey Cheney, and I'm the Executive Director at the Minnesota Association of Charter Schools. Charter public schools in Minnesota employ passionate public school teachers who educate approximately 70,000 public school students, and we believe that they, like all public school students, deserve equitable funding. Charters currently receive $132 per pupil in long-term facilities maintenance revenue funding. While charter schools have many direct facility preservation and maintenance expenses, this funding goes directly into school general operating budgets and thus impacts direct services to students. Cutting current funding for charter school students not only widens the funding gap for charter public school students, but it cuts essential services that our students and their families rely on. These cuts could impact teachers, counselors, and support staff that kids meet with every day. Public school students who attend charter schools in Minnesota are amongst the most vulnerable in our state. For example, our students are 20% EL, 60% students of color, and 60% students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. These proposed cuts would have significant real-world consequences on some of our state's most vulnerable kids. We ask you to please find another way. Do not make these unfair cuts that target public school students who attend charter schools. Our public school students in Minnesota deserve your protection and need more support now more than ever.
Thank you much. Ms. Burt, if you'd like to begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Sarah Burt, a lobbyist with Education Minnesota. We represent 84,000 educators across the state. Minnesota is facing an educator shortage crisis due to the chronic underfunding of public education for decades. We often say student learning conditions are educator working conditions. Nearly 9 out of 10 schools in Minnesota are severely impacted by this shortage. This is due to high levels of burnout, low pay, teacher pensions are not the retention tool they were created to be, and the spiraling cost of healthcare is unaffordable for these workers. This creates instability in the educator workforce, which has the greatest impact on students of color, students with disabilities, and students in rural areas. The solid investments from 2023 were the first attempts in decades to meaningfully support our students and educators. This good work was done before any of us could have imagined the levels of chaos and instability at the federal level this year and how that'll impact Minnesota's budget outlook. Due to all of this, budget choices this year are difficult to say the least. We appreciate this bill covers the cost of UI for the next 2 summers and extends a compensatory hold harmless and continues to fund student support personnel aid. However, delinking the...
We do have to end. Thank you. Mr. Walseth.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Sam Walseth here on behalf of the Minnesota Rural Education Association and the schools advocating for fair funding. Combined, it's over 250 school districts across greater Minnesota. I'll truncate my comments and say ditto to everything Mr. Kronquist said on behalf of AMSD, MESA, and MSBA, but I do want to give a note of thanks to a few items. The changes to student support personnel aid are very much welcome. We appreciate that. We do want to give a note of caution about the new formula distribution mechanism for the cooperative element of that. That is still a work in progress. I've had a handful of educational cooperatives reach out about potential losses of revenue with that new formula, so we want to keep working with you on that. The consolidation aid is very important to some of our rural school districts, and thank you for the LTFM roofs expansion. That's been a work in progress for a number of years. Madam Chair, I'm just going to wrap up with a big ticket. It's the formula. With 2023, the historic piece for us was the formula inflator. Along with all the historic policies and mandates that came on board, the formula inflator was the piece that helped get that job done. And to see the Senate wholesale strike that from law is a real problem and sending a real bad message out there right now. We're going to ask you to reinstate that language, do a blink off for 2 years, and at least send a message from the state Senate that you are committed to that revenue to our schools. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Walseth. And then tomorrow, folks, we are going to mark up our omnibus bill. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned.